Hello, hi, and welcome to another episode of Wellness in the Workplace. My name is Mbali Mzinyane and I am your host. Wellness in the Workplace is a podcast that aims to equip new and experienced professionals with the tools and insights to navigate challenging workplace dynamics. And on this episode, we are kicking off our new series called My Career Story. So this is a series where I'll be interviewing a number of women from all different walks of life who'll be sharing their career journeys right here on the podcast. We'll be talking about some of the challenges that they faced throughout their career journeys, the lessons that they've learned, and pretty much how they've gotten to where they are today. And for my first guest for this new series, brings me absolute privilege and honor to introduce Onkgopotse Khumalo. I've been admiring her from a distance on the socials. She is the founder of The Pocket Couch. She's a social entrepreneur and just an all-round trailblazer with an extensive background in finance, in the consulting space, and currently in social entrepreneurship. Welcome to Wellness in the Workplace.
Thank you for having me. It's cool to hear that you've been kind of stalking me in the socials. I've been stalking you back, girl. One day.
It's happening today. Today is that day. So thank you for taking the time to be here.
Thank you.
And I mean, in the intro, I mentioned, your background having been in finance, briefly at one of the major consulting firms, and now venturing into social entrepreneurship. That is quite a journey. And before we get into just the nitty-gritty of how you got to where you are with the Pocket Couch and some of your other social entrepreneurship ventures, I want to know a bit more about you. How were you raised? Where are you from? And pretty much what culminated to the women that I'm seeing before me.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I was born and raised in Joburg.
Okay.
My parents are from Pretoria. It's always so interesting when people say like, but where you're from? Like, are you from Joburg? I really am. And my parents are from Pretoria. So GP is where it's at.
Yeah.
So I have two older siblings, a sister and a brother. So youngest child. My parents live in Fourways. I also live in Fourways. I decided quite like at a young age that I wanted to go to UCT. So it's kind of like been in my head for a long time. I had a bit of a tussle with my parents about it. They
said relocation.
Yeah, they were like, no ways. Yeah. And then they put this challenge forward and they said, you can only go if you find a way to pay for it.
Okay.
I think it was like the first time I was like, oh my gosh, is this what adulting might feel like? Anyway, so I worked hard, got a scholarship, went to UCT. I've lived in Cape Town a couple of times and moved back. Okay. The center kind of keeps pulling me back to Joburg. I'm also a mom to a beautiful, boisterous, very active 3-year-old.
Energetic.
Super energetic. I mean, if I could take a little bit of his energy and bottle it, I would just be so much more energetic and productive. That's probably been, in my kind of later years, like one of my biggest teachers. Like he is one of my biggest teachers, I would say. Even though it might sound like strange, but there's a lot of like values that he's reinforced, a lot of ideas that he's challenged around like how I think through things. Other than that, I was raised in a super loving family, very matriarchal, which is great. That also kind of really feeds into some of my values and ideals. Surrounded by a lot of strong women. My mom is one of 8 sisters. Sure. So very strong personalities, kind of, and while I didn't see them every day, I think that kind of very, strong-willed, independent kind of character really did feed into who I am today. Yeah. But then also, the caring aspect of my family dynamic and my dad kind of assuming roles that are stereotypical roles, like cooking every day. Yeah. And my mom was like working long hours because she's a doctor. So a little bit of a unique context, but other than that, like a very beautiful upbringing, I would say.
It sounds like it. It sounds like it, especially when you mentioned that you're surrounded by like a lot of women and how you're seeing a lot of values around independence reflected pretty much in the women that you are today, right?
Yeah.
I want to chat a bit more about what you studied and why you decided to study what you studied, because you said you went to UCT, obviously spent about 3+ years possibly in the university. So tell us more a bit about that. How did you decide what you wanted to study, and what was that experience like for you?
So honestly, my parents told me to study it. I mean, look, I had a vague idea of what chartered accountancy was, but there were no chartered accountants in my family. It's a very scientific family: doctors, engineers, lawyers. So initially I wanted to be a doctor because my mom's a doctor. I have kind of 4 doctors in my family, kind of immediate and around extended family, and so my parents said no, and they were like, "You're gonna study finance," and I said, "Okay, I guess," and I wasn't too keen on that, and so I studied. I went out to UCT and sought out to be a CA. I didn't really understand what it was, or like kind of what I was going to. I just knew I was going to do accounting, and I was fairly good at accounting. And then kind of a year and a half into my journey, I was like, okay, now is like the big moment for me to assert myself and tell my parents, I'm not doing it. This is not what I want to do. And so I shifted to kind of adjacent. So I shifted to finance. Okay. And I kind of thought it was kind of the middle ground, because it's not deviating too far from where they would want me to be, but it's also like something I'm actually interested in. Yeah,
something that you're good at.
So I kind of made a slight shift, ended up doing my finance honors at GCT as well, and that's kind of what happened. So I didn't have a epiphany about what I wanted to do. My parents told me to do it.
And in hindsight, do you think you would have changed that? And if you were to be given an option to choose again, do you think you would choose differently?
Probably.
Okay. Knowing what you know now.
I think, I definitely think I would have gone into medicine.
Okay.
And it's really kind of reinforces itself in kind of the things that I gravitate towards. And I probably would have studied medicine. Maybe I would have specialized in something different, but it's definitely something I would have considered.
Interesting. And so after your journey at UCT, you've done your honors. Did you go straight into the workplace? And how did it all start when you did go into the workplace?
So I did go straight into the workplace. I think it was kind of one of the first few times I was like humbled by how difficult it is to navigate the big bad world that is kind of corporate. And even just like starting before I got to work at the bank is we were all kind of about to graduate and essentially competing for the same jobs, applying for the same grad programs, applying for the same and we kind of everyone wanted to go work at a big like bulge bracket investment bank, and we like really it was very competitive, and it was kind of like, how do you differentiate yourself, etc. But anyway, after tons of interviews with banks and being on a couple of grad programs, I ended up going to work at a bank, and I mean, it was a very unique experience. I think I didn't know what to expect. I mean, you've never been in a corporate setting, but I think I was very, very lucky to be taken in by like 2 older women who were more seasoned in the profession. And I remember quite distinctly feeling like, okay, this is a really scary environment to be in, and it's super intimidating. But they've got me. And that was kind of, it made it a lot more smooth to transition into the space.
And was this like a sought out mentorship by them, or did you initiate that like engagement and request that they support you in your transition into the corporate world? So
I think I was lucky enough for them to just embrace me. I think over time, I started to understand and kind of solidify what mentorship looks like, how to like cultivate a mentor-mentee relationship. But at the time, I think I was quite naive, and I just
as to what it was, and its value in your career.
Yeah, and I think it was good for me in the sense that I really appreciate authentic kind of relationships.
I see.
And I think like as I navigated the space, like some of the schools of thought are like you kind of have to really be, and I don't disagree, like active and like ask somebody, will you be my mentor?
Yes.
I kind of prefer like a more organic kind of relationship. I do believe that you need to be intentional and align yourself with the people with whom you share values and you'd like to kind of emulate them in some way. But I kind of feel it's awkward to ask somebody to be your mentor unless you've kind of cultivated
a relationship
of some sort.
Understand. And so in your time at the bank, I mean, from what I hear, the bank is quite ruthless, especially if you've gone into investment banking. What was that like for you? What did your life look like in terms of just, your identity in the corporate space, outside of that, in your friendships and any other relationships that may have been, I guess, impacted by your transition into the working world?
Yeah, so I think, I think it was the impact that it had, at least my first working experience. I was lucky that it wasn't super intense from like a time perspective. That happened in the next transition.
Okay.
So I still had time to like gym and like have relationships outside of work. So that was great. But I think it was kind of the first time that I kind of started to feel like sensing that I didn't belong. And so I was kind of like, oh my gosh, like, there's people around me that just know what they're doing and they seem to, they're like on it, and I'm like, and that's when I started, you start putting names to things and then like the good old imposter syndrome like, that we all talk about. And I just felt so like scared, and what it did is like I kind of withdrew into myself in the sense that like I wouldn't ask questions in kind of meetings because I figured like people would probably think that they're invalid questions to ask, or
it seems too obvious.
Or like, assert, even when I did try assert something, there's always somebody louder in the room, right? And there's always somebody who thinks they know more than you do, and a lot of times they don't. So I think it was kind of foundational in trying to like understand who I want to be in this career journey. I think I made a lot of just like, I wouldn't say missteps, but looking back, I would kind of apply the lessons I learned later on into that context, and who knows, maybe it would have been a different experience, but I suppose I had to learn. But I just remember feeling super intimidated. Until I had a moment where a guy who's relatively senior to me made like this major mistake that cost the bank like millions.
Oh my goodness.
And I remember having raised the question, before we went to pitch, and he kind of like dismissed it. And I didn't have like an I told you so moment, but like in my mind I was like, go get it together. Like you know what you're talking about. You've earned your place here. You studied at one of the most, competitive and prestigious universities in the country. You did really well. Like, just step into it. I kind of like had to like shake myself out
into it. So you touched on the next role, which I'm assuming was in the consulting space. Which is quite intense. And I think in spaces like that, one would assume that, people in those types of environments, high pressure, fast paced, high performance environments, people don't struggle with things like imposter syndrome or second guessing themselves. How did you navigate the big bad consulting world?
Oh man.
Because for us looking from the outside, it is intimidating. You know, you always think that these are like the 1%ers of the world, essentially, or whatever context that you're in, and that there's obviously limited place and spaces within that organization. So if you make it there, you are definitely the cream of the crop.
Yeah.
So how did you find your way in there, and how did you navigate that space?
Yeah, I always find it so ironic that, you know, that's how it's perceived, that like everybody is just walking around confident in the space, like, you know, like suits is law, but those kind of adjacent, yes. But what I found is that it's actually, and somebody used the term, I think we used the term at the firm, we're actually just a whole bunch of insecure overachievers, really, like all just coming together and trying to figure it out. But because of the nature of the job, like I think most professional services spaces, but strategy consulting or management consulting in particular, we sell, right? We sell ideas. We sell solutions to problems. And so you get very good at wearing a mask. You may be terrified and you may not know what the full answer is, but you've got to look like you know what the answer is. And I think that's kind of the culture that you kind of have to assimilate in. And only when you start having like authentic conversations with people and like you start being vulnerable yourself, do you really start to unpack or kind of peel back the layers of like how people are really feeling, how they're really navigating this space. And I didn't do that initially because I also wanted to be like, you know, the Jessica Pearson.
Yes, I've got my stuff together. Like, I've got my act together.
Yeah, and then I just kind of was like, what if I actually told someone I don't have it together? And like I need help, you know, and you know, you obviously have to be very discerning about who you trust with that kind of information, because at the end of the day, it's a workplace, it's a marketplace, it's hugely competitive. And so I was lucky enough to find my tribe. And we were like, oh my gosh, we're all struggling. And that it was great to kind of at points in the journey or in between projects to be able to take off the mask. And that kind of gave you like a renewed sense of energy.
Sure.
To then show up, because you're like, we're all looking like we have it together, but not all of us do, and that's okay.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And that speaks to authenticity, right? Which is something you also highlighted in forming relationships with potential mentors, even allies and peers.
Right.
Because I think in being authentic with yourself, you're then able to attract people who are like you and not attract people who are like the mask that you're portraying.
Right.
So, it is important to just stay true to yourself and just be honest about your challenges and your experiences, right? Yeah. So in terms of just some of the challenges that you've had to overcome in just the different spaces, different industries and organizations that you've been in, what would you say are some of the maybe personal or potentially even organizational challenges that you've had to really grapple with that gave you a different perspective about how you show up in the workplace and just the workplace and the reality of corporate South Africa itself?
Sure, so many, but I'll probably kind of distill them into maybe three. So the joke amongst some management consultants that worked at the firm is that we speak in threes, 'cause it's like part of the training.
Yeah, I've heard of
3,
that.
5, and 7. So I often feel like I'm either saying 3 things or I'm like not saying
anything at all. Well, it's memorable if it's in threes, right?
I think the first thing is definitely healthy boundaries.
Sure.
And I think I really started to kind of, think through this idea of boundaries when I was in management consulting. It's incredibly difficult, especially at the beginning, to assert the boundaries, to protect your health, to protect your relationships outside of work, etc. But it was in that space that I kind of said, no, if I don't start, putting these boundaries down, yes, sometimes they have to be porous. They don't have to be like hard and fast. Then I'm literally gonna fall apart. Because you get to a place where you are not seeing your family much. Sure. You are not, getting to exercise much. You're, you don't even like. You don't really get to see the sunset because you're either in a team room or like you're on a plane. Something inside me just snapped and I said, I'm actually not gonna go to the team dinner. I've been with you guys all day, every day until like 10. Or I can't sit and have dinner at the table with the team. I'm going home to have dinner. And it's a brave thing to do because not everyone is going to kind of embrace that. You're kind of like, who do you think you are? You think you can go home and
you can
have
get
dinner
isolated
with
actually.
your family?
You can get isolated for asserting yourself in that way.
So that was kind of just the bravery, the courage to assert healthy boundaries. I would say the second thing is the power of vulnerability.
Sure.
So I also kind of got to a place where I was tired of positioning and portraying myself in a certain way. And I think, you've got to, like I said, be discerning around how you show up in different spaces. But I found that when I started kind of probing a little bit more or like being more vulnerable in the workplace, it would kind of create an environment that was healthy for other people to be vulnerable. And specifically, around like mental well-being. When you are in a high stress environment for so long, and so consistently, it does take a toll. And I don't think that the space itself was like psychologically safe enough for me to feel comfortable being vulnerable. But I did it anyway, in kind of quite a measured way still. So just like vulnerability and what it does for not just you but the rest of the people who occupy the space you're in. Then I would say the third thing is probably courage related as well, but the courage to immerse yourself in spaces with people that don't look like you.
Sure. Okay.
I think oftentimes especially early on, I would kind of gravitate towards Black women because they look like me and like we probably have like some shared, kind of experiences, etc. But when I started kind of breaking kind of the mold, it also took courage. I realized that like it's just this is how you form allies, like to advance your ambitions and to kind of break the barriers for women, for Black women that exist inherently, whether we like them or not, that we have to actively try and kind of break down. We've got to get allies into the space. Like it's not we the more we kind of fight against it, like the boys club or whatever, the more we then also begin to isolate ourselves. So like immerse yourself. And coincidentally, I feel like the people that really contributed the most to sponsoring me and mentoring me and actually accelerating my journey for the most part are men. And that's when I just was like, I need to get in front of people that don't look like me and that don't think like me, because if they are occupying the spaces that I want to occupy predominantly, I need to be able to like have authentic relationships with them too. And I need to be top of mind for them when they think about, who can I promote or like who can I provide a step up opportunity to. So I think those are probably the three main things.
Sure. Those are so powerful because the common thread, I think, across all of them is courage, which you touched on, right? And just the ability to cultivate that courage to be vulnerable, to put yourself in those spaces that are uncomfortable initially and intimidating to some extent. So, I'm definitely going to remember all three. But I want to talk about what you do with the Pocket Couch because that's how I came across your page on LinkedIn and the work that you do around mental health advocacy and what you call as democratizing mental health care access. So tell us about Pocket Couch. What is it? How did you start it? And yeah, where's the company now?
I suppose on the premise initially of my journey with mental well-being.
Okay.
And so I got to a place where I was really struggling. I was extremely anxious, like sometimes to the point of like debilitating nausea. And like one day I was driving to work or to the clients and I needed to throw up. I was super nervous or anxious about, I don't know, I don't even remember. It was like a presentation and I had to pull over and throw up. And, you know, and then I just drove back home and I called my sister and I realized it was just a combination of this kind of very like pressure cooker environment and just like not being able to eat healthy, not being able to work out, not being able to, you know, see the people I love. And I ended up being admitted into hospital. I had psychologists, luckily had psychologists see me through a program. And over time kind of I was, you know, I came out on the other side of it a lot healthier, better equipped. And in that process, I just kind of thought like, how many people are going through the same thing? That was my first question. The second question was, how many people have access to this kind of care? Because this is expensive.
Very much so.
And then the third thing was like, let me find out. And like, if it seems like this is a big enough problem to solve, how can I help solve it? And so that's kind of how it was birthed. I kind of toyed with the idea for a little bit, like maybe I should not, like who really, I don't know. And then I had this like, I just kept having these confirmations, and one of the biggest ones was losing a friend to suicide.
Sure.
So a family friend, and you know, also just super overachiever, working at a bank, very sociable, just like a light. And that was kind of like one of the things that pushed me to like start.
Sure.
And so I said like, how can I figure out a way to make access to mental well-being easier? Because I really didn't know where to go, what to do, who to ask. And that's ironic because I'm in a medical family. But that's still something I struggled with. And then how can we make it more accessible? Because the stay at the hospital, the 10-day stay was like, I think when I saw the bill, it was like 80,000 rand. Sure. And I said, this is like, who has this kind of access
money?
To care? And thank God I had medical aid because I wouldn't have 80,000 rand on hand. And then the third thing was like, how do I create an influential platform to destigmatize mental health? Because even as I navigated my journey, I didn't feel safe enough to share, and because of the stereotypes that exist around mental health, the
stigma around it.
Exactly. And so a Pocket Couch was born, and it is essentially an online platform that connects people that are looking for mental healthcare help with experts and resources. The idea being, how do we make it more affordable, convenient, and relatable? I speak about relatability because I think that's one of the things that kind of exacerbates stigma. People can't see themselves as people that are struggling with mental well-being. And so that's kind of what it is. Today we are in the fortunate enough position to have facilitated access to over, I think it crossed 60,000 minutes of therapy, to our online therapy, to our end users, and 80% of which was at no cost to the end users.
Amazing.
And how we do that is we form partnerships with organizations, universities, and schools, and they kind of purchase bundles of therapeutic care in the form of online therapy, resources, etc., for their employees, students, etc. And that's kind of where we are right now. We're still quite an early stage startup, but I think it's just such an exciting space to be in, at the intersection of healthcare and tech, because so much is happening in tech right now. And with each kind of new advancement, I think it unlocks an opportunity to further democratize access to things like healthcare, education, etc. In my case, it's predominantly healthcare, right? That's where we're at.
Amazing. So as you were talking about it, I was just thinking about the meaning behind the name, the pocket couch. And in my mind, I'm thinking therapy, you're sitting on a couch, but because it's a mobile platform, it's in your pocket. So it's a pocket couch.
That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it.
I literally just thought about that now. I was like, oh, actually that makes sense. That's what it is.
I'm so glad you get it.
I got it.
Like when I told my mom, like, this is the name, she was like, what?
What is this?
What? This is like, and coincidentally, there was a company, I don't know if it's still in existence, that literally has like a mobile couch that you kind of like, and then you inflate it.
So an actual couch.
Yeah, and it was called Pocket Couch. And then I was like, well, Facebook did it. So I added the article, the Pocket Couch. So before we started doing our SEO, etc., you would like type in the Pocket Couch and this
then you
couch,
see this portable couch.
It's like, oh my gosh. But thank God, SEO and Google Ads.
Amazing. So what are you learning about yourself in this journey of like social entrepreneurship? Having obviously applying some of the lessons from your corporate journey and just to, strengthen, right, your business and your value proposition as a social entrepreneur and just for the pocket couch.
Yeah. It's interesting because those three things that I talked about feature very often. So going backwards to putting myself in front of and immersing myself in spaces with people that don't look like me, that has been crucial in this kind of entrepreneurial tech space, which is largely male dominated, largely white male dominated. You're competing with people that have access to an uncle who can give them startup capital of like 200,000 rand. You don't have an uncle who can do that, right? So like, it's a completely different ball game, and statistics will also show. Like, I think 1% of VC funding went to women-owned startups last year. And so if I'm not kind of getting into spaces where there are allocators of capital, predominantly who are white males, I just will not, accelerate at the pace I need to.
Sure.
And it's just the reality. Like, and so that kind of occupying and like kind of pushing the door down to get into those spaces continues to run through my journey. The second thing around... let me go to the first one around vulnerability, I think is what I spoke about. I think it's so kind of poignant in the space I'm in. Because I get to speak about mental health as it relates to my context, as it relates to how I see it in the world, and it's what I do as well. So what it does is it kind of is creating a brand. I'm creating and reinforcing my brand as being somebody who champions, access to mental health care. And I don't think I'd be able to kind of set my brand apart if I wasn't vulnerable too about my journey with mental health and kind of journeying towards mental well-being. I forgot what the second one was.
That's okay, it'll come back.
But I think those lessons, I see them like kind of boundaries. Boundaries, not getting it right. And I'll tell you why, because the buck stops with you when you would know when you're running your own thing. If you're not on it, the business
nobody
is
else
not on
is.
it. And we're still in a place where we're an early stage startup. It's a relatively small team, very lean, obviously to optimize, resources and capital efficiency. But ultimately, I find that the worlds are still colliding. Like weekends don't feel like weekends sometimes because there's no start and end. Like we're just always working, and I actually haven't yet created healthy enough boundaries for me as it relates to work.
But it's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress.
Okay. And in terms of your transition from corporate into entrepreneurship, how did you prepare yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, because they're two completely different worlds. And I think how you show up in the demands in each of the spaces is also different.
Yeah. If I'm being completely honest.
Also, and financially.
I didn't prepare myself mentally, physically.
Yeah.
But I did prepare myself somewhat financially.
Okay, financially, yeah. Because there's some money that needs to be considered
there's
to start
so
out.
much money to be considered.
Yeah.
I sold my car.
Okay.
So that's one.
Sold your car. Okay.
Yeah.
For capital.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I remember, people saying like, this is crazy. Like, how do you even know this is going to work?
Yeah.
And we'll find out. Like, we'll continue to find out. But I just felt enough passion about it to do it. So I was like, if it doesn't work out, like, I can go back and like buy a new car. Like, so I sold my car. I did about a year of like freelance consulting.
Okay.
So I would call it like my bridging year. I wanted to create enough space for me to have some time to allocate to kind of laying the foundation for Pocket Couch and kind of stress testing my assumptions, etc. But also, make money and like save that money to be like the initial startup, startup capital pool. So I'd say financially, I could have prepared more, but I think it's just like, you don't really know when you're going to get like an idea and then when you're going to get the pull and the conviction. So I would almost say just start doing it anyway, like saving for, if you've obviously got your retirement savings and a whole bunch of like traditional savings, but also like maybe like an ideas pot, and like saving for that one day where if it so happens that you have a project you want to start building, then you have like startup capital. And then if you don't, you could just put it into your retirement or go on holiday or I don't know. I think
an ideas fund.
Yeah.
I like that. I really do. And what do you know now about mental health advocacy that you didn't know before you started the Pocket Couch?
Sure. I think one of the things is that it is not popular content, or at least at the time.
Okay.
I think post-COVID, the focus on mental health started being, but it's not like at the time when I started talking about it, like people would kind of like not really engage, when you talk about like mental health and suicide statistics and whatnot, and people don't like engaging with things that they're either afraid of or that they don't understand. And that was pretty difficult. Like, I think I kind of wanted people to have the same enthusiasm about like solving this thing, and like to have the same like shock when they find out that like, I don't know, like, suicide is the fastest growing cause of death in the age group 15 to 29.
Sure.
And I thought, like, I just need to say that, and people are going to be like, let's do it, let's change
do
it.
something about it. Yeah.
But and I guess it comes back to like stigma and lack of knowledge. And so that's one of the things I learned. As time has gone on, though, it's become more commonplace to talk about. So, so it's not like... It's not sexy, people don't want to like buy mental health, but it's important.
It's important,
I think another thing I've also learned is the more vulnerable I am, the more people resonate with my business and like what I'm trying to do. And so I got over that barrier a while ago. I just talk about my story as well. And there's like a strong personal nexus connected to what I'm doing. And then, I think those are the two main things.
And what is your biggest and grandest vision for the Pocket Couch?
Sure. I think it's really just putting mental health care in everyone's pocket such that they can get help within 3 clicks. And by everyone, I mean low income, middle income, developed world countries, And that's really it. And there's various ways to do that. But if I think about, at the moment, look, it's not yet like an emergency service. So that's one of the disclaimers we put. But if I think about the pocket couch being able to meet someone where they're at in a moment where they may, fall into the trap of thinking there's no hope, die by suicide. And for that intervention to change the course of their lives, that's like, I may never know about it, but that's why I do what I do.
Sure. Love that. I love that. And in closing, what does wellness look like for you?
That's such a tough question.
It's a big question, but it's worth some reflection.
I think wellness for me looks like genuinely and in earnest listening to your body and your mind.
Sure.
I think oftentimes we ignore cues from our bodies and our minds that tell us that there's something our body needs and that there's something our body needs us to change. And I was listening to, so I'm always looking at wellness trends and like across various dimensions, and there's this girl I'm following. She's, I guess it's a plug, shameless plug, I think everyone should listen to it, called Glucose Goddess.
Okay.
And she's talking a lot about glucose and the impact on various things. One of them is mental health.
Sure.
And you can go and kind of find out a whole bunch of stuff about it. But something like fatigue, right, is like your body is telling you something. Like it's not giving up on you, it's not sabotaging you, it's not trying to make you less productive. It's like literal, like, that that empty like sign that starts flashing, and then doing something about it, because all too often we ignore the signs until like you are complete flat out burnt out, or you are, whatever the case may be. That's what wellness looks like, and it looks different for different people. I may be struggling with just like fatigue, while somebody may be struggling with, getting constantly injured, or like not being able to fall asleep. And that's what wellness really is. I used to have this perception that like wellness and self-care are like long baths and getting pedicures, and that's great if that feeds your soul and feeds your body and feeds your mind. But I think it's less about the doing and more about the being and the thinking and reflecting. So
I love that. That. So where can we find out more about the Pocket Couch? Where can we find out more about you?
So you can follow us on the Pocket Couch. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, soon to be TikTok.
Amazing.
You can also follow our website, www.thepocketcouch.com. And you can follow me if you'd like. I'm Onxy_K, so ONXXY_K.
Awesome. And we can find her on LinkedIn as well, because that's how I found her. Amazing. Thank you so much, Onkgopotse.
Thank you.
Completely loved our chat and your openness and willingness and vulnerability.
It was great to be
It was
here.
amazing. It was amazing. Thank you for tuning in. If you're listening, if you're watching, thank you for your continued support. Do follow Wellness in the Workplace _ on Instagram. You can find the podcast on all major podcast streaming services. My name is Mbali Mzinyane. I will catch you on the next episode. Goodbye.
Bye.